Good evening, everyone. I'm Dervla McTiernan. I'm the author of The Murder Rule, among other books. And I'd like to begin this evening by extending my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and their elders, past and present. And I'd like to particularly extend those respects to any First Nations people who are watching us this evening. I am so happy to be here with Karin Slaughter, #1 international best-selling writer. Karin needs no introduction from the likes of me because I know you all already know her very well, but it's worth always noting when a woman has had this kind of success. Karin has sold more than 40 million books. She's been published in more than 120 territories. And we're here tonight to discuss all sorts of things, but mostly her brilliant new book, which is called Girl Forgotten. And this is the Australian cover. And the gorgeous cover you can see in Karin's screen is the, well, is that American? Because this is the Irish cover.
So this is yeah, Irish and UK. This is the US one, but we don't. That's all I have.
Aha.
They literally just printed them, and that's the Dutch over there with the gold rose.
Well, I have to ask them. My first question is: after so many books, can you tell if you were just to glance at a bunch of different books, say by another writer, could you tell which was for which territory? Do you think?
Probably, because Australia and New Zealand in particular love a woman running. Right. So, and sometimes she's in a forest, there she's on the beach, but she's always in this jacket that no one ever in the South would wear. Because it's, when I first started touring, I had to buy a jacket like that. And I literally had to go to a different state.
Get it? It looks like a leather kind of a jacket, like a little black jacket.
Yeah. Like you would die here. I do. So I have this leather jacket and it's beautiful. And I've actually in this state worn it 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. Why did you buy it? Because there was a joke on Twitter between crime writers about all of us for our first headshot. Like everybody is in front of a brick wall wearing a black leather jacket and none of us own the jacket.
Right.
So that's my question. Were you encouraged to buy a black leather jacket when you started?
Peer pressure. No, yeah. I just thought it looked good. And then I brought it home and it just stayed in the closet.
It's not wearable.
Also rain jacket, because I didn't really have a rain jacket because we're never out, it's like between the car and the house and the car and wherever you're going and you just run.
When it's raining. Do you not get a very long rainy season in Atlanta?
Not really. So, it was like Ireland, all it does is rain, right? It explains your beautiful warm complexions. But
what are you talking about? Can you not see my tan?
I should yeah, you're in a lovely crew. Have you been in the sun?
Yeah. I live in Perth now, that's why.
Oh, okay. Sunny Perth. Yeah. Did you see that in the UK they're giving movie tickets to redheads so they can get inside away from the heat? And my murder brain,
not see that, but they should be doing it. It is bad over there. People are not used to that sort of heat. There's no air conditioning.
But my murder brain was like, holy crap, you could kill all the redheads. Like, just wait for the theater to fill up. Boom.
Light them in.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have to ask you, Karin, could you please introduce the book to us? Can you introduce Girl Forgotten to us?
It's a kind of sequel, but not a sequel to Pieces of Her. And it has, oh, look at you. What else you got?
I'm very organized. This is the smaller paperback version, which I think has just come out in Australia.
Oh, okay. So do you guys know Toni Collette there?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
So the book, The Girl Forgotten, it features Andrea and her mother, Laura. And there's a story from the past and one from the present, because apparently I just love doing that. I love reading that. So that's what I'm doing. And the present story, of course, Andrea's basically exploded her life and she's become a U.S. Marshal, mainly just to piss her mother off because her mom's like, why would you be a pig? And in the backstory, there's a girl named Emily Vaughn, and she's got like the really unfortunate situation of being in the first chapter of a Karin Slaughter novel. So things aren't going to be good for her. Yeah. Bless. So it's about her life and, just some bad things that happen. And of course, somehow through the magic of fiction, it keys into something Andy's looking into.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the US Marshals? Because Australia has federal police. Obviously, Ireland doesn't need to, but the federal police here are quite different. So can you tell us a little bit about the role US Marshals play in the US?
Well, can we just say first, Ireland doesn't need a federal police service because it's like, yeah, Bob did it.
Yeah.
Everybody knows everybody.
We don't have states. It's just one country. Like, well, it's obviously we've got the north, but other than that, it's one country. So therefore, there's no state breakup. So that's the main thing.
Yeah,
also, the Irish police have a very different attitude. I have to tell you. Don't know if you've ever encountered Irish police, but they're not. It's not like American policing culture. It's very much like go on now, and don't do it again. You know that sort of attitude. A bit more.
Yeah, we have that here. It's called white justice.
Yes, right.
Well, you know, most Americans don't know about the U.S. Marshals either. I mean, we've got Con Air, the movie with Nicolas Cage, and The Fugitive. So that's really what we know. But they do a lot more than that. They're kind of, I call them the Swiss Army knife of American law enforcement, because they, especially after 9/11, the FBI was really looking outward at foreign terrorism. Wait, this should have been looking at domestic terrorism, but whatever. And so the U.S. Marshals just come in and they take up the slack.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know, it was really interesting to learn all the cool things they do. But what was the most horrific part for me was the training they go through. I met this really fascinating woman who's like very petite, smaller than me, and she's a marshal, and she went through this training. She put on like 5 pounds of muscle.
Oh my God.
They fight like hand-to-hand combat every day. And
I didn't know any of this until I read it in the book. That scene you describe where she's doing that last run on the graduate. I mean, I was, oh my God, like I was nauseous just thinking about it. Unreal.
Well, you've been here when it's kind of hot. That wasn't hot when you were here. You posted a picture of yourself outside your hotel, and I'm like, I hope she didn't stay there long because she could burst into flames, right? But so this is like on the coast, which is very tropical. They fight in a sand pit that's got fleas in it. They get like hit with fire hoses. There's literally an ambulance waiting, right? Because people get hurt. And they're not pulling their punches, right? So this woman told me she went up against a guy who was 6'3", and she had to take him down. And that's what might happen in real life. So they don't hold back, right?
You definitely get that. That's such strong, like when I see Andrea, like she's changed so much, and I love her as a character. I don't know, it's because I just got to know her so well, but she's so different. She starts off in Pieces of Her, like she's not a child, she's not 18 years old, but she's very lost, like completely directionless. And then she kind of comes into her own. Now she's really like coming into her own in this book. But if we go back to her at Pieces of Her, why do you think even as an adult she is so, like, I have my own theory, but I'd love to know what the actual reason is. Why is she so lost at that point in her life?
Well, you know, my generation, basically generation fucked, right? You know, we're between the baby boomers and the millennials. So we got like a little taste of why the boomers think life is so great. Yeah. But then we got like, we saw the decline, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's all the millennials know is just how shit life is. Right? Yeah. I mean, there's a reason my generation invented irony. And so I wanted to like talk about how crappy it is for millennials, and just, you know, particularly a very American thing is student loan debt. I mean, we've got kids, well, they're not kids, they're like in their 30s and 40s, and they're got $250,000 in loans to still pay off. And there's no way they're ever going to do that. So they're not able to buy a house. They're not able to, you know, their credit's wrecked, and they think, why should I do anything? I'm never going to get out of this. And it's really like, it's done staggering damage to the economy, because they should be starting their lives. So Andrea's in that, but she's also, you know, her mom's kept her very sheltered. And every society has a phrase for what Laura has done. You know, here we call it a helicopter parent. In Denmark, they call it a curling parent, because, you know, curling, that sport where the broom you know,
Yes.
where your parent smooths away.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So she's kind of suffered from that. So I guess the whole lesson is what you really needed to do is to like get involved in like a violent murder, and it will kind of restart you.
Change your life.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask, do you think she would have found herself if it wasn't for all of the trauma and everything she goes through and pieces of her?
I don't think so. And you know, that's the good and bad of trauma. I mean, COVID is a massive trauma, right? We're all going through this, but we know what trauma does to people, especially when they're children, right? You're more likely to have heart disease, diabetes, substance abuse problems, depression. And it doesn't even have to be a trauma that happens to you as a child. It's kind of inherited if your parents were traumatized. So
yes, I've read about that.
Yeah, God knows where we're going to be in 40 years, probably dead, but you know, it's a lot. And so I think for Andrea, she did what her mom did and is like, okay, that happened. I got to reset my life. I got to change everything. And there's a great phrase in there that I have constantly been told my entire life, which is wherever you go, there you are. Like if you don't deal with your shit's going to strangle you eventually.
It's going to be with you.
Yeah.
I think the fact that you sat with her, like it wasn't like you just drew a quick picture of, oh, here's this directionless girl, but now she moves on. Like you really felt it. You really felt her flailing, and then you felt her growth. And that's why I kind of really believed in her. And that's why it's such a joy now when she's really kicking ass in this book. It's really fun to read, you know?
Yeah. Well, she is her mother's daughter.
She is her mother's daughter. And I love this thing with Laura, where Laura's like, I am so supportive of you, honey. I want you to go out there and find your passion at the beginning of book 1. And then Andrea finds her passion, which is to be U.S. Marshal. She's like, no, not that passion, something else, anything else.
Yeah.
Have you had that experience? Have you had that directed at you, or have you ever directed that at someone else? That's sort of like huge encouragement, but maybe with some conditions.
I've had it directed at me when I became, well, I was very fortunate. My first book was very successful. And then I had a lot of women saying, oh, it's great you're successful, but you shouldn't be successful that way, writing about violence against women. And one, I was like, well, go fuck yourself. But two, I was like, do you not realize how wrong it is for a woman to tell another woman she shouldn't do something? Right? I mean, we get enough of that from like the man, right?
We do, yeah.
But you know, I was really lucky that as a young girl, my dad was very encouraging of me. And he knew I was strange. He didn't quite understand, you know, why I did the things I did. And to be fair, I didn't either, right? But he was very supportive, and he said, you can do anything you want, honestly. You know, just don't get arrested like your sister. But I remember when I graduated high school, he said, you know, I'm so proud of you. You're going to college. He didn't know I was going to drop out, but you know, it had a lot of hope for me. He said, you can do anything you want. You just can't move back home. So it was like, that was a lesson.
Okay. That's pretty good. I like that.
Just like, you know, I got time for me to get on with my life, baby.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, look, I want to change gears a little bit, because the book obviously deals with some pretty serious topics, and it talks about domestic violence. And I know that you've had some experience that with your grandparents, and I don't know if you'd be comfortable telling us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of it, to talk about it, you know, because when I was a little girl, my grandmother was horrifically abused by my grandfather, and we never talked about it. You know, she'd have a cut lip or a black eye or sometimes a broken bone. And it was just understood, even as a kid, like through osmosis, I knew that we couldn't talk about it. And that silence only ever helped my grandfather. It never helped her, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when I wrote my first book. That's why I just said, I'm going to talk about what violence looks like. Because if you don't talk about it, you can kind of be like, oh, it's not that bad, or she hit him back. Because like, I'm sure my 5'4" grandmother was terrified when my grandfather, who's a big guy, hit her, but he wasn't scared when she hit him, right? I mean, we need to think that's like well, I hit him back. Well, yeah, he wasn't afraid for his life and thinking you were going to kill him, right? So I just wanted to really show it. And that's why, because of seeing that and seeing that how pernicious silence can be. And it's just an excuse to forget about these women, and they lose their voice, they lose their names, they lose everything because of violence.
Yeah, I mean, the silence only ever goes one way. When I was growing up in Ireland, it was very similar. There was this culture of the family was sacrosanct and you don't look behind the front door, but that only ever protected certain kinds of behavior. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's something really wrong with the culture that continues that, but it's happening all over the place. I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk about was Emily, who is so heartbreaking. And I mean, it's a sign of a good book when you're absolutely furious, you know. And I was so mad, Karen, and I just wished I could be there, like I could go into the scene, because what I wouldn't do, you know, and what I could just change her life and make everything right, you know, and I couldn't. Yeah. And it was so hard to read that, because she's this lost girl. She's not much more than a girl, and she is being, you know, horribly rejected and punished by all of her friends and all of her family and basically her entire community because she's pregnant. And she's very young.
Did that ever happen in Ireland?
Oh my God, it was.
Yeah, we know about the Magdalene laundry.
No, right? I mean, the Magdalene laundries and everything. But even when I was born in 76, that's quite late. But when I was growing up, there was still that sort of culture, like women who were sexual in any way were punished. And like, even when I was in college, me and my girlfriends, you know, you'd meet a nice guy, something would happen, and you'd say, yeah, I went back to this place, but nothing happened. Everybody always said, but nothing happened, you know, like we just kissed a bit, because good girls didn't. And that was in the 90s, like, you know, I mean, that's messed up. It took, today I don't think it's like that, but the culture took a long time to slowly change. And what I was going to ask you was, I mean, obviously you would have written the scenes about Emily before the Roe decision came down.
Yeah.
Do you think that was in your head, the political pressure to change this and that culture, that did you feel that was coming?
Yes and no. I mean, it's kind of like when you're in a car accident and how everything slows down and you're thinking, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it was shot. I mean, women were crying here that I know, you know, I mean, and the vast majority of Americans want Roe to stay legal, right?
Yeah.
But the vast number of Americans want gun control, right? Sensible gun control. So it was shocking and horrific, but also I wrote this book a year ago. Like, as you know, it takes about a year to, you know, get through the process. Well, actually over a year ago. So it instantly became more political, but also I was glad in a way, because I thought this is what we're returning to. And people often think of reproductive health care like in some woman's 9 months pregnant and decides she doesn't want it, which never happened. No doctor would. That's murder, right?
Never
happened for that, right?
Yeah.
But you know, the Republican Party talks about it like it happens all the time, and then they talk about the poor 10-year-old girl who was a victim of incest or rape and had to go to a different state to get an abortion. Oh, that rarely happens, right? But you know, what I think a lot of Americans don't understand, unfortunately, until it happens to them, is that abortion care is for women who also want children, right? Things happen in pregnancies, and a lot of time miscarriages happen. And so you have these horror stories of women who are having miscarriages, but they can't get the procedure because it's illegal. They have to wait until their life is in danger and they turn septic, and then they can have an abortion. Or ectopic pregnancies, right? I mean, there's some dumbasses, lawmakers saying if it's ectopic, then the doctor has to replant the egg in the womb. It's like, that is not a thing.
It's not an option. It doesn't exist.
Like, right. These are the people setting policy. Are those saying, well, even if it's rape or incest, it's a gift. It's like, okay, well, you carry that gift for 9 months, motherfucker. No one ever thinks about the trauma it causes women. No. And that goes back to what you're talking about, right? With women being ostracized for having sex. And I have a real problem with people who say, okay, well, there should be an exception for rape and incest. Because what you're saying is, I will allow it if she didn't want or enjoy the sex.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, which is really wrong. And also, you and I write about crime. We know police officers, we know investigations. Do you really want a woman to have to get a letter from a police officer saying she was raped? most cops, either they don't have the
Don't believe it.
resources or don't believe the women, or they make value judgments, or meanwhile time is passing and the woman is suffering, you know. So it's just, we're hearing so many horror stories here about women who, with wanted pregnancies, they lose it, something happens, there's a genetic defect. There was a horrific story of a woman who, you know, a lot of these genetic issues don't present until later in pregnancy. And now the only option is to induce and to give birth, right? Or, you know, have a C-section, which is very traumatic, and or to carry it until it's at term, or at the mark for term. So nobody really thinks about that. And, you know, with Emily, she did have, legally there were choices, but her parents made the decision for her.
Yeah. And she was so constrained. I mean, look, in Galway, in Ireland, not so long ago, we had a situation exactly like that, where a woman had a pregnancy that failed, and she went into she had septicemia, and she died because they waited too long. Because there was a legal question mark about whether or not they could carry out the abortion. Now, there wasn't really, but there was confusion about whether or not they could do it. And so they waited. And that's the sort of thing that happens. And it happens more and more. And it's going to happen in this weird legal vacuum until things are hopefully resolved in the right direction. But it's frightening. And the cultural shift is the thing that is frightening me. And it's the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because it's difficult to see from the outside looking in to the US exactly what's happening, because, sorry, Julie. Sorry. She's digging her bed for the night. Apologies, everybody. We're having such serious conversation.
This is serious.
In the background. God, I'm so professional. Apologies. Anyway,
culture.
You know, what I was going to ask you about is culture. So it feels like there's a shift, or there's a certain group of people, it's obviously not the majority, but there's a strong group of people pushing towards this, again, controlling women and controlling their sexuality and putting them in a box. Like, what is it like to experience that on the ground? Because as you mentioned earlier, the vast majority of Americans want to have abortion rights. They certainly want to have access to contraception and all sorts of other things. But some people clearly want to change that for everybody else.
Right.
Like they've had success now. So what is it like on the ground? How does it feel to be in the midst of all that?
It's shocking. And, you know, I do have friends who are against abortion, but they're not for putting their beliefs on everybody else. They think it's a personal choice.
Sure.
And that's great. That's how it should be, right? If you don't want an abortion, don't have one.
Absolutely.
But it is a greater piece, because we just had a vote on contraception in the House of Representatives, and over 100 Republicans voted against access to contraceptives.
I saw that.
I know, it's shocking. But also, you know, they're using it, right? You know, they're using contraception. And so,
of course.
I mean, but you look at their wives, and maybe they're not, they don't have to, right? Because their wives are like, I'm over your shit. But it's and then gay marriage also. And, you know, it really, if you look at America, we're very much like the UK in a lot of ways. Like, you know, there's a lot of harbingers in the UK that precede things happening in America, Brexit, for instance, and then Trump and whatever. But the UK doesn't have that religious vein running through everything, right? And Ireland is a good example of this. And I think, like, the last time you guys voted on the abortion referendum, you kind of said, we're over that, right?
Enough already.
But, you know, if you have a question about America, usually it's rooted in racism or religion, right? If you're like, why are they doing that crazy stuff? Those are the two reasons. And it goes back to the Puritans in the sense of collectivism. And China's doing the same thing, right? Where they have this social value that they give you, a score. So if you are outside of society, you're not following the rules, you can't get married, you can't own land, you can't vote, right? And the religious people set these rules. And you know, we had pilgrims and they weren't very successful, because they were like, hey, let's get along. And the Indians are like, hey, you know, we don't want you here. You know, here's some corn, but you're not going to get anything. And the Puritans came, and they were wealthier merchant class people. and they came and they just said, this is how it's going to be. Right.
Mm.
And Americans talk about freedom of religion, but not from religion.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and
yes.
that was really important to the founders, is that we don't want to recognize one religion. Because if you look at other religions, Judaism, for instance, their idea, abortion isn't even mentioned in the Bible, right? I mean, there's this one verse, I forget where it is. I'm sure people know, about a man who thinks his wife who is pregnant cheated on him and it's not his baby. And the priest gives her a potion, and if it's not her husband's baby, her leg will wither away, right? And so they interpret that as an abortion. And it's like, okay, one, this dude is like not believing his wife. It's a completely different situation there. It's a paternity issue, right? The Judge Judy stuff. So and they talk about life begins at breath, right? That's also has a biblical foundation, and you can't breathe inside, right? Or at the quickening, so it's really just this, what they want to do is control women.
Yes. It's about control, I think. It feels like that's what it's about. Because
if you're against abortion, then you should be for contraception.
Yes.
And if you're against abortion, you should support women who are pregnant. I mean,
there should
a
be
single mother is more single mothers are in poverty than any other class. White and black.
There's no care after the fact.
Exactly. So we don't have health care. So it's not right.
Okay. It is wrong. So wrong. I'm going to ask you a totally different question on a more slightly upbeat note so that we move forward. I'm going to ask you, what was your best memory from writing this book, from writing Girl Forgotten?
Oh, well, that's kind of shitty because you know the answer. It's like when you finish it.
Always.
It's like, always. I mean, and I love the book. I really do. But honestly, it's such an emotional journey, particularly one like this. Some books are really plot driven, right?
Yes.
And so you've got that framework to move it along. But some books are emotionally driven. And this is there's plot, don't get me wrong, but the emotion of it is really gut wrenching, particularly with Emily. So, and Andrea to a certain extent, because she's trying so hard to find out, this is who I want to be. So I'm going to fake it till I make it. So, but the Emily bits, people talk about being canceled. We went to high school, people got canceled all the time. We all know there was an Emily in every class, right?
Sure.
Or, the guy who was clearly gay and got the shit beaten out of him. And, so there's and he got canceled, and everybody knows people in high school who got canceled. So it's nothing new. And it's horrible. It's horrible. And that was really difficult for me to write with Emily, was her just feeling so protected in this group and then so quickly cast out.
It was very hard to read in parts, but so satisfying towards the end, because we do get a resolution, because you never cheat us, Karen. We always get an actual proper ending with your books, which is brilliant.
True. Well, yours too.
So they're well, thank you very much. There are crime novels that just skim the surface, of the worlds that they inhabit, and we get just enough, like a sketch of an industry or a location, just enough to give us some background. But your books are not like that, because when you touch on a topic, you describe it beautifully, like whether it's music or whether it's art or whether it's the military, you go there. And you do that here in this book, particularly with art. I mean, with music, it's perfect, but with art in Girl Forgotten. And it's really beautiful. And I wondered to what degree those things come from your own personal interest, the depth of research, or is it just that you're a bloody professional writer, and if you're going to write about something, you're going to do the work?
It's both of those things. I do love art. I don't know how to describe it. And for Andrea, every reference she has an artistic base, right? So when I'm writing Sarah and Will, Sarah is more of a medical, Will is more of an investigatory, and Andrea is going to talk about, mustard instead of orange, right? She's just always going to have. And so every time she has a simile or a metaphor or something, it has to be based in art. And that has to be researched. And, like the Dada group, of course, I know what they are, but Hannah Hach, no, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted, and so I'm like, okay, I don't know that much about collage. I want to have a woman, right? And so I don't want to have the most famous woman, right?
Yes.
To be obscure. And okay, well, what's her style? And how am I going to put this together? How's it going to work? I need to buy an $80 book that's like this thin. Oh, here it is. Look, this freaking thing. 80 bucks. 80 bucks.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. Right? Amazing.
So I can see, what she does, what she looks like, the shit she put up with, right? I mean, that is so powerful.
Oh, it's so cool.
It's so relevant too, right?
Pulling
us all back. Well, that's really horrific. Anyway, so I had to really do deep dive into that. The really strange thing that happened was, and maybe you've had this happen before. So I'm working on this and I send it to my editor and she says, this is so weird. My teenage daughter had an art project in her school and she chose to do a collage based on Hannah Hach, like completely independent of, right? So weird.
Whoa, I mean, if you have something like crazy. That, the world is a crazy place.
It is. It's like, but my editor and I are like, she's my brain's best friend. So maybe it was just sending it across, right?
Yeah.
But so that kind of stuff I got to really deep dive into. And as you know, in the book, it's a small piece, right? But it's very important.
But it's powerful piece. Though, very powerful. And I think it's part of why I always believe in your books. There's a difference between a book that you just read and enjoy and a book that you're in and you fully believe in it, because those moments just add an extra layer and I believe in them. I believe in her as an artist. I believe in her reaction to the art, and that comes from the work you're doing, So thank you, because I absolutely love the book. It's fabulous.
Thank you.
And I could talk to you all evening, but I know we've run out of time.
Yes, so Chewy has needs.
Chewy has needs. She does actually have needs. They're both queuing up at the door. So I better get on with it. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. It's been so lovely to talk to Karin as always and to learn from her. And I'm going to rewatch this and steal all her ideas. That's my plan. Just be sure to tag friends and family in the comments if you think they'd like to watch this or learn more. And Karin, to wrap up, could you tell everybody where they can hear more from you? They can watch more from you and see.
Oh God, if they can stomach it, I'm on Facebook and all this, everything but TikTok, because I
draw the line at TikTok.
It's a lot of work, but I love it. But it's a lot of work.
I don't have it in me. I wish I did, but I don't. I'm not going to go there.
We should tell people to get your book as well, because it's fantastic. You were in Atlanta with me and we talked about it, and hopefully sold. Well, I know we sold a couple of copies because I bought some to give to friends. So great.
Thank God for you, Karin. That's all I can say.
And I'm going to be in Australia, hopefully soon.
Are you coming?
Next year, maybe, and we'll do this together and we'll
do this in person.
I should say you did bring me some Australian treats and I posted about it and all the Australians were like, what the fuck is this? I've never heard of it. So,
I know, because they're not standard. Like it was like a version.
Oh,
it's
okay.
So for the Aussies who are watching this, I brought these cocoa black Lamington biscuits. So they look like nothing like normal Lamingtons. And so, but they're kind of kooky and they were Australian. And then of course, I'm not surprised you got that reaction. Everybody was probably like,
but that's such an Australian reaction, right? Like, what does she know? She's Irish.
Exactly. Sorry, everybody. I tried. Okay.
Yes,
God almighty.
Well, I enjoyed it. That's all that matters.
That matters. Now you can get a copy of Karin's book. So here's Pieces of Her, which is the first one, which is a #1 Netflix series also, and is fabulous. And that will give you your introduction to Andrea. And here is the latest book, Girl Forgotten. You can get them both on booktopia.com.au. And my editor will kill me if I don't also say you can also get the Murder Rule.
Excellent book. Very good.
So, thank you very much, Karin. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm sorry we're rushing away, but as Karin said, Chewy has needs. So hopefully we'll catch you next time. Thank you very much, Karin, for your time this evening.
Thank you.